Today's video is about one of the most underrated soul funk groups to ever exist. This group's origins begin in Detroit, but towards the end of the dominating Motown era. This group is arguably the most underrated group from Detroit. The centerpiece of today's video is all about the Dramatics. Now before we start, let's be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and push that notification bell to be sure you won't miss out on any more content. Now, without further ado, let's cue that intro. Before assuming the name The Dramatics, the vocal sextet composed of Rob Davis, Ron Banks, Larry Reed, Robert Ellington, Larry Squirrel Dempsey, and Elbert Wilkins initially released 2 singles as the dynamics on the Wingate imprint that saw no chart action. The group became a quintet upon Ellington's exit. They were originally known as the Sensations, but changed their billing to the Dramatics in 1965. Later that same year, the group released its first single entitled Bingo, which was recorded for Wingate, a division of Golden World Records in Detroit, Michigan. By 1967, Motown had absorbed the entire Golden World Records operation. The Dramatics then moved to another local Detroit label, Sport Records, where they garnered their first minor hit single, All Because of You. Which peaked at number 42 on the R&B charts. However, in spite of the exposure and limited record sales, some group members became discouraged, which facilitated a major personnel change. William G. Howard replaced lead singer Reed, and Willie Ford of the Capitals replaced Rob Davis. Also during this time, the Dramatics had signed with producer Don Davis Production Company. The Dramatics signed with Stax Records in 1968, but moved on after one unsuccessful release. The 1969 Temptations inspired tune, Your Love Was Strange, got regional airplay but never charted nationally. Even though the group managed to stay together, the ensuing years were unproductive for chart action and sales. Between 1967 and 1971, the Dramatics made very little noise on the national scene. By the end of 1971, Davis summoned the group to the studio to record producer and songwriter Tony Hester's What You See Is What You Get. The single was the Dramatics' first major national hit, peaking at number 3 on the R&B charts and sustaining chart action for 15 weeks. That single was followed by the R&B Top 10 single, Get Up and Get Down. The group members at this time were Ron Banks, William G. Howard, Elbert Wilkins, Willie Ford, and Larry Dempsey. These 5 members are often thought of as the original Dramatics, though it is more accurate to call them the Classic 5, as only Ron Banks, Larry Dempsey, and Elbert Wilkins were part of the original lineup. This quintet are the 5 singers that the general public first got to know as the Dramatics shortly after the success of their first album. Howard and Wilkins left the group and formed their own version of the Dramatics. The following year, the Dramatics released In the Rain, the single torpedoed its way to the number 1 spot on the R&B charts, maintaining that position for 4 consecutive weeks. The single also peaked at number 5 on the pop charts. Ironically, in spite of the national attention the group was receiving, another personnel shuffle was simmering. Larry L.J. Reynolds, who had been a member of Chocolate Syrup and was pursuing a solo career during this time, met Dramatics member Banks at the Apollo following a performance by the group. It just so happened that Howard was absent that night. Reynolds auditioned for Banks backstage. It was not too long afterwards that Reynolds, who was also signed to Don Davis Production Company, began to occasionally sit in with the Dramatics during Howard's absences. In 1973, Howard's decision to leave the group opened the door for Reynolds' entrance. Reynolds' vocal presence and permanent entry into the group was manifested with the release of the R&B Top 10 single, Hey You Get Off My Mountain. And while Reynolds was replacing Howard, Lenny Mays was replacing Wilkins, which spelled out identity problems for the remainder of the group. Wilkins formed his own version of the Dramatics and began touring. During this time and pending legal procedures, the name of the group was changed to Ron Banks' The Dramatics. The Dramatics' success continued with mainly R&B top 20 hits during the heyday of disco, cracking the R&B top 10 just once more with Welcome Back Home in 1980. In 1982, the group moved to Capitol Records and made their first album without Don Davis, with Banks acting as producer. L.J. Reynolds left to go solo in 1981, and Larry Demps decided to go into teaching and spend more time with his family after having joined the group's original lineup in 1964 with Banks. When Ron Banks also decided to try a solo career, the group disbanded for a few years but reformed in the mid-1980s to record new material every 3 or 4 years. Since the early 80s, they occasionally reunite for concert events. From 2012, there were 2 groups of the Dramatics. One group was led by L.J. Reynolds. The other group was led by the original member of the Dramatics, Willie Lee Ford. The Dramatics featuring Willie Ford focused on staying true to the Dramatics' original and easily recognizable concept of 5-part harmonies and 5 dynamic lead voices in the group at their shows until his passing at 68 years old on May 28, 2019 after having surgery. February 22, 2000, William Howard sadly passed away from a heart attack at the age of 49. On March 4, 2010, Ron Banks was at home with his family when he abruptly passed out. According to fellow Dramatics singer L.J. Reynolds, who had spoken to Ron just minutes earlier, and later on that day, Banks sadly passed away at the age of 58. L.J. Reynolds' Dramatics featured the singing talents of Reynolds and also included music from Reynolds' solo career at their shows. On September 24, 2018, L.J. Reynolds legally took the trademark rights to the name The Dramatics. The Dramatics were officially inducted into the R&B Music Hall of Fame at Cleveland State University's Waytagen Auditorium on Saturday, August 17, 2013. Now, before we go, I have a question for you all. What is your favorite song from the Dramatics?